One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today on the show, we've got Jay McGrath, Area Vice President for UiPath. UiPath is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing companies in the world. They've gone from 100 customers to 5,000 customers, from 8 million to somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 500 million over the last 2.5 years. So it's just been absolutely incredible growth. And Jay has a lot of great insights, not just about how to manage that growth, but also how to lead, how to influence people that don't report to you, and how to be an executive, and how to think about repeatability in your sales process. So it's a great conversation. Before we get there, we want to thank our sponsor. Our sponsor for today's show is Outreach. Outreach is the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale. From automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best, Outreach has your back. We're into 2020. The other thing I'll say is just about the growth of Revenue Collective, which some of you have heard on the podcast before. Our associates program is exploding. Associates are for all the folks that are managers, directors, senior managers across sales, marketing, customer success, and operations. Our total community is approaching 1,200, and it'll be close to 3,000 to 4,000 by the end of the year. And we're exclusively focused on career development. So we're helping our members not just be better at their job, but find new jobs. We have relationships with over 50 different search partners, negotiate more effectively for their jobs, understand market compensation and information and transparency, market, by function, and giving all of our members the tools and information they need to succeed, not just at their company, because we don't work for companies, we work for individuals. So it's across company, across years, it's career enablement, that's the category. So that's my little plug for Revenue Collective. Without further ado, let's listen to the show. It's a great interview with Jay McGrath, so let's take a listen. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We are incredibly excited today to have on the show Jay McGrath. Jay is the Area Vice President of Sales in the Americas for UiPath. If you're not familiar with UiPath, one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing SaaS business out there in the world, valued at over $7 billion. Jay manages the sales team that covers financial services, Canada, and the Northeast United States, and is responsible for building a great team to generate growth for the company as it expands into these markets. Prior to joining UiPath, Jay spent 30 years in the financial services industry, holding various roles in sales, direct marketing, online marketing, and cross-selling strategies. He has an MBA in marketing from Temple University and still resides in the Philadelphia area with his family. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you. So I just gave a little bit of a commercial, but there's no amount of praise or fawning or adoration can overhype the growth that UiPath has experienced. So first of all, just your title is Area Vice President of Sales. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Great. So UiPath, tell us about this company and just tell us a little bit about your responsibilities and about the company itself. What does it do? And a little bit about its recent growth trajectory.
Sure. So UiPath is a robotic process automation company, software. It's a terrible name for software. We didn't coin it, but basically we do one of four things for our customers, right? One is we enable digital transformation, which my favorite part about that, Sam, is any company you ask about digital transformation, they'll give you a different answer. It means something different to everybody. But generally, companies need to modernize, and rebuilding or replacing entire tech stacks is very expensive. And so what we do is use our software to connect older tech stacks to newer tech stacks to get the work done without human intervention. A lot faster, a lot cheaper, a lot more accurate, right? We improve a customer experience. So all of us have smartphones. We're used to the speed and access and simplicity of it. But behind the green curtain in most companies, they have a lot of antiquated systems that just can't keep up, can't do their work at that speed or with that level of accuracy or access. And so our robots basically connect your front end, mobile device through their portal into those back end systems so that the transaction can be completed, again, without human intervention or delay. We improve employee satisfaction. So I've been in sales for a long time. I hate doing expense reports more than anything. Obviously, I have to, but I dislike it. And so by using robotics and having the robot grab information from my receipt images, from my calendar, I can have my expense reports largely automated, which saves that time and takes that burden off my shoulders, right? And then the last one is increasing compliance and control. So the thing about business today is it is incredibly complex, and there are tons of rules, both internal audit, if you're a publicly traded company, if you're a regulated entity like a lot of the financial services companies we work with, there's tons of rules and complexity in the business, all of which have to be managed. And so it's one thing to have a written policy about how you do all that. It's another thing to make sure it's followed 100% of the time. And so companies are using RPA robotics to run the processes to the letter of the procedure, and then they're able to produce audit reports to prove that it was done exactly the way it should be. It's an incredibly hot market right now, as you mentioned. There are 14 companies in this space, but really there are three, right? There are three large ones. And it's like the best part about this is you can get a conversation. So a lot of times in sales, it's sort of tough to find somebody who'll give you the time and listen. We don't have any trouble getting meetings right now. Getting sales is a whole different story, and I'm sure we can dive into that a little bit. But getting the attention of folks right now in this space is it's hot and it's a lot of fun.
So tell us a little bit about the growth trajectory of UiPath, just rough numbers, because the numbers are just so, they're so amazing. So tell us a little bit about like the last couple of years, and whatever numbers you're free to share, whatever numbers they're going to be big. So tell us about it.
Sure. So I joined in March of 2017. I was the second person hired in the Americas. So we were just expanding, right? Our roots are in Bucharest, Romania. We're now headquartered in New York City, but our founder and our founding team built this product and started in Romania. And so they were expanding into the Americas market in early 2017. And at that time, we were about $8 million in revenue and less than 100 customers. Now, I can't tell you the revenue for 2019, but we did publish at the end of 2018 that we did 190 million. And all I'll say is we're all smiling over our growth rate of 19 over 18. We did announce at our customer event in October that we now have 5,000 customers. So we went from less than 100 customers at the beginning of 2017 to before the end of 19 having 5,000 customers. And the revenue growth is something like 30,000%. It's just ridiculous.
Sorry to ask sort of like a seemingly simple question that might have a million different answers, but how did you do that?
Well, how we do it has changed a lot, actually. So when I first joined, I joke like I was hired as a sales leader, but there was nobody to lead, right? And so I had to get out and handle sales calls. In fact, I was here 2 weeks and my boss was like, hey, we have this sponsorship in an event at the Hyatt on the river in Jersey City. You have to go there and like man the booth, right, and answer questions. And I was like, dude, I don't know what I'm talking about. I just got here, right? And he's like, no, you have to do it. And it actually worked out brilliantly, Sam, because in 36 hours, I had hundreds of opportunities to work on my pitch, right? I just got a ton of at-bats in a very short period of time. And so a couple of times in the middle of talking to people, they just turned around and walked away. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to say it that way anymore, right? And you kind of learn over sales calls. And that really enabled me to choose carefully the people I hired to sell on my teams as we were building it out, right? Like I started out just me 2.5 years ago-ish, almost 3. There are 55 sellers in my area in that East region you mentioned, and we have 150, 170 sellers in total in the Americas, including LATAM. So as we're hiring all of those people, we're drawing on the lessons we learned from early on. And I think, again, how we did it shifted. In the beginning, it was sort of, dazzle them with the technology and all the cool stuff it can do, because it can do a lot of cool stuff. And people would buy in, but they were buying in small. It was like an experiment investment, right? And then you'd have to go back and work really hard to get an upsell. So the deal size would be $50K, $60K. You got to do a lot of transactions to drive growth that way. And so what we figured out is we actually needed to change how we sold from, hey, look at how awesome this is and what it can do from a technical feature standpoint, and flip it more into a value sell approach, right? A business conversation. And it's different than and I don't mean to minimize other software, but if I'm selling Salesforce, I'm looking for people who need a CRM or an ability to handle customer interactions, right? Or marketing automation. If I'm Workday, I'm looking for an HR department that doesn't have, the technology to run their people operations. For us, this doesn't solve one problem or three problems. It solves 30,000 problems. And so I have to get in and figure out what the challenges are you're facing in your finance department, in HR, in IT, in call center operations, in back office operations, and figure out how the automation tool can address that problem. And so I have to be a problem hunter as a salesperson, right? And then I have to be able to connect the customer to this part of our solution, to their problem, and show them that it's gonna fix it, and then it's gonna return, either a savings of time or money or not making errors. It's a very complex sale.
So did you do it 100% outbound? Is it just hiring more salespeople plus the fact that the market seems ready for RPA? Because you're selling to major enterprises, major financial institutions, and they have even the quickest sales cycle, particularly for a young company, is still hard to get faster than 12 months. So, is it a function of just massive inbounds? Is it a function of you just hired a ton of salespeople into this gaping opportunity? Or is it like you're counting customers in a funny way, like every team is a customer, and that's how you got to 5,000?
That's 5,000 unique businesses. It's not,
Wow.
So a really good question. When I started, it was massive inbound. You could not keep up with the flow of stuff coming our way, right? That has slowed a little bit, which is fine. It's to be expected. So now it's a function of, I would say, really a three-headed. We still get leads from our marketing team, right? They do a really good job between events and online activity and PR, getting us, folks coming to us and looking for information. But the bulk of it today comes from our own roll up your sleeves as a salesperson and prospect through your network, through our board members. We have an incredibly supportive board who will make introductions for us to some of the largest companies, that we need access to. Good old fashioned, email or get out and meet people. So the salespeople are driving a lot of their own business. And then, as you might imagine, we have a lot of partners, right? A lot of implementation partners, the big four, all the major outsourcing firms, and then literally hundreds of boutique, technology firms, implementation firms who they see the value of this, right? They see that this is something that's going to help their client base. And so it's giving them the opportunity to go in and have a different conversation with someone that they've been doing a lot of work for years. And that opens up a lot of avenues for us as well. So that partner network plus our own elbow grease as a sales force and our marketing team is really how we generate the business now.
A lot of different companies are building really exciting technology. And yet there's always a pressure to try to define or distill, particularly if you're a young company, distill the use case into a very practical business solution that you offer against a set business problem. It's very rare that a company is so willingly embraces this sort of amorphous platform strategy of we can do anything, just tell us what your problems are. Have you found that that's been a challenge or an opportunity? Yes, it can do anything, but that also means nobody's quite sure when UiPath is applicable or not, or am I incorrect?
I always say it's the blessing and the curse. I keep saying it does 30,000 things. There's no scientific basis for that number, but it is high.
Thank you for your honesty.
It's the blessing and the curse, right? The blessing is it can do almost anything. The curse is people can't conceive of almost anything, right? And so when I mentioned the value selling before, we use command of the message from a company called Force Management. And I think the reason it works well for us is because when you get into the discovery process and you're uncovering either these problems that the customer has or these positive outcomes that they're trying to drive, in that process, you can build a set of requirements. So again, if I'm selling hardware like storage, right, or cloud, I'm going and looking for requirements and budget. Most IT departments know what they need in terms of security and configurability and size and all that stuff, right? Very few companies know what they need from an RPA platform right now, right? So we build a set of requirements from our discovery process and connecting to those business positive outcomes or fixing some problems. And then we build a proof of concept that demonstrates we meet all of those required capabilities, right? And then use cases, we think of them more like we have, out of those 5,000 customers, we have hundreds that are advocates for us. And so if you're in energy and you say, hey, I need 3 references, I can ask you what size, what type of energy, and I can find 3 without a problem, right? Same in banking. Same in insurance, healthcare. We have tons of customers who are willing to spend time speaking to people who are considering signing on with us about their experience working with us and working with our platform. And all of that, stems from, I just think, our culture and the way we treat them, right? But when you're new to this, and even some companies that have it, thinking about what do I need it to do and what does it need to look like and what problems can it solve for me, it doesn't fit neatly into any box. And that makes it a challenge to sell, but that's the fun part, right? If you're that kind of salesperson like I am, that's the fun part.
Yeah, well, and it's certainly the fun part where it does do great things. You are working with a great product, and now, then you can really apply your sales skills when you've got something that people generally are interested in. And now it's, as you said, it's a matter of turning awareness into interest and then to a purchase, as opposed to just trying to generate awareness for the category in general. Let's just, you have a really interesting background, and you didn't start off in sales, I don't think. So talk to us a little bit about how you got to where you are, and walk us through, because a lot of folks, they some of them start off in startup land, but I think this is your first quote unquote startup, even though, you're well north of 100 million in revenue. But walk us through your background a little bit.
Yeah, so I graduated college in the early 90s into a recession. And so there wasn't really too many marketing jobs to be had. And so I kept working at the insurance company that I worked at to pay my way through school. And then, because it's an insurance company, an old school insurance company, I went into compliance for a year so I could get into marketing there, which seems counterintuitive, but that's sort of how it worked there. And I managed to, work my way into a marketing career there, during the heyday of direct mail. So I learned, direct mail in that space, and then went to MBNA, the big credit card giant. And I like to think of that as my first startup, which I realize sounds really weird, but they were just getting into the insurance business, which is how I got started there. And so we were 4 or 5 people who had to build a business from scratch. We had, revenue and expense targets to hit. We actually exceeded them in our first year. I think we turned a profit of $100,000 when we were supposed to lose like 500, and you would have thought we made 10 billion with how excited we were. But it really kind of gave me the feeling for, like, I like to build. Like, when I'm in a business, I like to build stuff and figure it out, not run it, right? If we always do it this way, that's boring. I lose interest, and that doesn't help anybody, right? Then I moved over into our business credit card division, and really with the idea of turning that into a more serious business. It was just sort of an afterthought, something we had because a couple of our customers had asked for it. And, we turned that into a major revenue and balance, outstanding balance contributor inside of, 3-4 years. And I'm so old, Sam, that we built the first online credit card application for them, back in the day, and started to push people to apply for credit cards online. That's how long ago that was. But I think just figuring out, okay, the business exists at this level, which is not really interesting. What are the strategies we can deploy to start to generate some volume with limited budgets, right? To grow the business more seriously. And over time, they started to feed us more and more investment dollars because we were, really just doing a great job of driving the business. And then I got into sales from there. So some people I was working with at Dun & Bradstreet, buying data from them to feed that marketing engine. When I decided to leave MBNA, they gave me an opportunity, and that's where I learned to sell. I mean, I kind of got the bug because we were selling affinity groups on our business credit cards, and our sales team would bring me into the conversation because I was the marketing guy who was going to put their brand out there and help build their revenue streams, from the endorsement. And I really enjoyed those conversations and the kill, if you will. So that's why I decided to go to D&B and jump into sales.
Just so I know, affinity groups means like you go to AARP and you say, hey, put AARP on this credit card and you'll get this percentage and we'll get this percentage.
Correct.
And in exchange, you will market this credit card to your community.
They'll do it sometimes in little stuff, but mostly back then it was, I get a list so I can mail them. We would get like a widget on their website where people could apply. When you're on a plane and they're pushing the miles card on you, sometimes you'll get agreements like that. But there's a big trade-off in all of that, right? To your point, what you pay, both in fixed investments and percent of transaction or percent of balances, all that stuff is all dependent on how much marketing they're willing to give back versus what cost you're going to shoulder. So at least back then it was a big thing. I know it still is today, but the groups are more targeted today than they were then.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that it's really it's a marketing problem, but it's a math problem because you have to make sure that whatever you're giving away in terms of support or rev share on the transaction is worth it relative to your typical cost of customer acquisition. Is that
correct? And I won't share who, because but I have friends that are still in the business, and a large affinity group or co-brand, which is the term you hear more for say large stores or something like that, right? It'll move from bank A to bank B, and people in bank B are all excited to get this new big logo. And you talk to people in Bank A and they're like, thank God they left. It was costing us so much money. So just there's a perception thing around, behind the scenes, there's people happy and sad on both ends of it. But it is sort of funny, like the bank they're leaving is somewhat happy they're going, and the bank that they're going to is thrilled to have them. And it's just funny to hear the stories on both sides of it.
The old winner's curse, be careful what you wish for. You might not want to win that deal.
That's right.
So you went from MBA to D&B as a sales executive. How did you make your way into sales leadership?
So we were growing out our financial services vertical, and that's what I know, right? I grew up in that space. I bought, tons of data and solutions in my role there. And I really was able to sort of parlay that into a successful sales career. At D&B, I could talk the language, right? I sort of knew the problems that the people I was selling to were facing. And so, I built enough of a track record. When they were expanding the team in financial services, they gave me a new group and said, here are some people we think can do this and some customers we think are right for it. Go figure it out. So we did that, for a couple of years and grew that business. Had a rough start, of course, but we did figure it out and got a good track record going there. And as that team grew over time and it turned more into run, I started to get bored, and D&B decided they were going to have a global accounts program for the first time ever in their history. Hired a gentleman from the outside to build it. And so I convinced him to make me the first GAM in the company's history. That was fun, trying to figure out 3 large, financial institutions across the globe and teach people in other markets, sort of the selling motion we found success with, but without sort of trampling on them. I always say, being a leader but not having anybody report to you is really hard. You really have to do it more by influence and preparation and showing that you care about them and the outcome versus people maybe who work on your team who want to please you so that they get the bonus or the good performance appraisal. It's a lot harder. I learned a lot about leadership in that job. And then I got lucky when he left and he landed at UiPath actually 3 years ago today. Believe it or not, just January 3rd. Oh, wow. Today's his 3rd anniversary. Yep. So Conrad landed here and I saw it on LinkedIn, said, let's have coffee. We talked for a half an hour and he figured out that I was looking for an opportunity, and it worked out really, really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so permit me a few tactical questions. So you mentioned the difficulty. So first of all, just defining it for the audience, because there's so many organizations. A very common thing that happens is a company starts up in a market, maybe it's Europe or maybe it's the US,
yeah.
And then they want to open international offices,
yeah. And
then they run into this problem and it's always as if they have, nobody's ever faced this challenge of matrixed organizations before, but then they don't know who should report to who and who should own the global relationship. So as a global accounts manager at D&B, your point was maybe it was like Deutsche Bank or Lehman Brothers, whomever.
Yes.
You owned the global relationship and you are comped on the global growth and revenue. But on a office by office, user by user basis, you did not own any of those relationships. Is that accurate? Or maybe you own the relationship with like the CFO or the chief marketing officer, but then all of the regional buys happened within the context of your regional offices. Is that am I understanding it correctly?
Correct. Yeah. So basically, your job is to get into that C-suite and build out sort of larger projects, larger initiatives in support of the local markets and bring things together where they make sense. Like, one of them was doing sort of this global initiative around cleaning up all of their customer databases because they kept getting into trouble, both with regulators and from, reporting results, because they just didn't have a clean view of their customers. And there's no way that customer could navigate the 6 different D&B markets and entities that they needed to interact with without, some senior level support within the organization, right? And so that's sort of your job. It is an overlay job. It's meeting people, setting strategy for the account, owning the pricing strategy, around what discounts you're going to provide and not, and helping those local people be successful. To me, that was the biggest thing I learned, was the best way I could be successful is by helping those 6 local people be successful in what they were doing, because all their results rolled up, right? So
how did you deal with the regional difficulties of somebody in London or somebody in, I don't know, Madrid or Hong Kong?
Yeah.
They have a boss, they feel regional affinity to that boss, and all of a sudden you're kind of putting a meeting on their calendar for every other Thursday at whatever, 7 p.m. their time.
Yeah.
And they're feeling like, why do I have to go to this meeting? And who is this guy? Yeah. Like, how did you overcome that? What were your strategies? Because I think what you're talking about is actually a key executive strategy that a lot of people don't realize they need to learn, which is how do you influence people that don't report to you?
Yeah.
So what did you do?
So I'll answer that by, it goes way, way back, but there's a Fortune magazine article about Joe Torre in like 2000 or 2001. Now, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Red Sox.
A lot of people aren't going to even know who Joe Torre is.
I'm going to tell you. So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Red Sox fan, right? Like since I'm 6 years old, all I give a crap about all summer is how the Red Sox are doing, right? But I have a lot of respect for him. And this article, you can still find it online. Joe Torre's managing the Yankees, and there's a lot of big personalities and big salaries on that team. And that was when they were winning, the World Series almost every year. And one of the things that struck me about his approach and why they're so successful is because he purposefully doesn't treat each player the same way. They have expectations. If you're on the team, this is what we expect of you. But how he coaches, how he interacts, how he communicates with each player is different, and it's based on what they need and how they can hear things, not how he wants to say it. And so I grab that and go here and go, okay, they're going to come to these meetings and they're going to listen to me. If they get a sense that I care about them and I care about their results, and they see that there's something in it for them, right? And so even in sales leadership now, with the 55 folks across my organization, when I'm having a conversation with each of them, some of them I will out and out challenge and tell them, you're not doing a good enough job and you need to be better at this. And I'm expecting this of you. And I get a little hard on them, like a scolding father, right? And in other ones, I'm going to put my arm around them and tell them what they're doing well, and then ask them to reach for a little bit more in a nicer way, because that's how each of them needs to hear it. I think you're spot on. Like, a big thing about being an executive is being able to influence people and get them to do what you need them to do when there's not a direct reporting relationship, whether they're at a customer or even internally. And the best way to do that is be a good communicator. And the best way to be a good communicator is to think about it through their lens instead of yours.
I think sometimes I hear that advice, but then I personally struggle to implement it sometimes, in the sense that I want to customize or modify my style to each individual, but I'm not quite sure how to do that, because my character is so dominant, my personality formed from childhood, that it's hard for me to modify. Do you have tools or strategies, or is it just as simple as, just drive for empathy and really try to put yourself in their shoes?
Yeah, look, I don't want to give you the impression I'm perfect at this. There's plenty of days where I hang up the phone and go, damn it, I didn't do that the way I wanted to, right? And I think being honest with people, and again, making sure they know that you care, right? That's a big thing, because then anything you say, they're going to know is coming from a place of, trying to help them and not just selfish motivation. I think we've all worked for people where it was all about our boss, and you got the sense they almost just didn't care, about you as a person and your success, right? And so just starting there, I think, is a big thing. The second thing, Sam, I couldn't tell you the amount of time I spend sort of replaying conversations in my head later in the day and trying to think, is there a better way I could have communicated my message, right? Something that would have resonated more, or do I like the way I did that? And then if I do, where else, would it be applicable? Communication's hard. You mentioned companies growing up around the world. We're roughly a third APJ, a third Americas, and a third EMEA in terms of revenue, which is almost unheard of for a company our age.
That is unheard of.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we have product development teams in what we call the 3 Bs: Bucharest, Bangalore, and Bellevue. Right. And so you have coders and product. Yeah. And you have coders and product people in 3 different parts of the world, 3 very different cultures, right? 3 very different viewpoints, right? And communication's hard, right? It's always the hardest part of building and running a business, is making sure everybody who needs to know something knows it, that people all are aimed in the same direction, that they're motivated. Communication is the tough part. So if you can get good at that, if you're a good communicator, I think you could be successful in any part of the business you choose to work in.
It's the skill. It's the critical skill. Unfortunately, I think it's more important than actual ability in some ways, because just the ability to communicate a message is more important than understanding how to do what the message implies in many ways, at least.
Agreed.
You've said how you get the results matters more than the results themselves, particularly when you're trying to grow fast.
Yeah.
Tell us what you mean by that, because you've gone from 100 customers to 5,000 customers, from 8 million to, let's say 500 million or whatever, some very, very large number.
Yep.
So when you say how you get the results matter more than the results, tell us what you mean by that.
So look, anybody in sales has had quarters where some magical deal appears out of nowhere. Or when you're speaking to the rep, you understand they have no idea how they sold this. They just happen to be in the right place at the right time, right? You can't scale a business that way. Our selling motion, I would argue, any selling motion has to have some level of discipline, preparation, and repeatability to it in order for you to scale. Now, that repeatability part's tough for us. Is that a word, Sam? Repeatability? Well, let's pretend it is.
I think it is. Okay. Yeah.
So it's
that you can invent words now, and if enough people say them or use them, then they have to become words in the dictionary. So repeatability.
If it's not in the dictionary, we're going to ask your listeners to upvote that one, right?
Exactly.
So there has to be a level of repeatability to it, and that's the tough part for us, because again, 30,000 things, right? Different. It comes out from so many different angles, but the process of getting in, understanding the business problems, building out the requirements. And I think, I know I've made this mistake, and I think a lot of salespeople do. We get what you call single threaded, right? We find one person in one department who will listen to us. That's our champion. They're going to walk us through the whole thing and get this deal done for us. And it doesn't work that way. Anybody who's read The Challenger Customer knows that number of people involved in any deal keeps going up and up and up over time. It's getting increasingly complex. And so instead of pretending like that's not there or lamenting it, I say, let's figure out who the 9 or 10 people are and get them all under the tent at the same time, right? And so that how you do it is bringing those people together and trying to get them to tell you where the holes are in your sales, in your proposal or your solution, right? Or your timeline are important. We joke because we have salespeople who are like, hey, we need you to float this timeline by them and show it to them and get them to commit to it. And they're like reluctant to do it. And when you ask them why, they're like, because I might find out I don't have a deal, or at least for this quarter, right? And my thinking is you might not, and you just don't know it. You're just hiding from that fact. So let's expose that fact. And so that's that how that be optimistic early in the sales process and pessimistic late in the sales process is what I try and get folks thinking about and doing. Right? That how is really important. Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
So question for you, because you mentioned single threading versus multi-threading, and just coming back to the 30,000 use cases, and then layering in the fact that I too have read The Challenger Customer. And one of the things that they say in that book is that your instinct, and I'm saying this because particularly when it's 30,000 use cases, your instinct is to go to each of those 9 people. And in fact, the number is probably much, much higher than that, and tailor your message uniquely to their situation. But what happens, at least in the challenger customer, and I guess my question is, do you experience that, or is that how the force management training of command the message takes over? What they say is when you try to overly customize each message to the CFO and the IT person and the procurement person, what happens is that you don't create alignment, and that while they all may agree to purchase your product, you're not going to get the price that you're looking for. So how do you overcome that and make sure that you're bringing all the right people into the thread so that it is a multi-threaded deal, but that you're not trying to say what each one of them wants to hear, and as a consequence of that, jeopardizing your pricing integrity and sort of your sales motion?
That's the problem with being a salesperson. Inherently, we want these people to like us, right? And we want them to choose us, right? It's about the money. The money motivation is definitely there, but I find with salespeople, they need validation, and they need somebody at the customer to tell them, "Hey, you're smart, and we love your product. We want to do business with you." That feeling is as motivating as the commission check, I find, right? So the folks on my team that do this particularly well, instead of trying to customize across the 9 people, actually build, it's a very short slide deck. I know I hate slides, but it's a very short slide deck that kind of outlines everything they've learned about those problems they're facing, those outcomes they're trying to drive, the requirements that would be on the table, what the metrics are that they would be looking to achieve. And so let's say they've done that with 2 people. When they get to the third person, instead of trying to tailor it to that third person, what they do is they start with what they already know. Hey, we've been talking to the people in your finance team, and this is the structure of what they're teaching us about your company and the challenges you're facing. What's missing from here that's impacting your department that maybe is similar? And so they start to build out essentially a cross-department business case for using automation, as well as a richer set of requirements. All of which, because the more problems you're solving and the more complicated the requirements are, it helps with that pricing thing you were talking about, right? So if I come in and I solve one problem, or I talk to 2 people, or I tailor to 9 people, and I have sort of 9 different conversations and 9 different small problems going, I'm going to get into a price war, and I'm going to have a hard time justifying, a larger sale. But if I have a cross-department, large problems for the entire business-based solution and a robust set of requirements we're meeting, my price defensibility and my deal size are much stronger.
It's just, that's a gem right there. So I hope people are listening, scribbling notes. Jay, one sort of last tactical question, which is, when you're thinking about POCs, do you, it's a big enterprise sale again. And the reason I'm asking is as follows. So many companies they develop a point solution, and that point solution can be sold for between, $10,000 and $50,000, primarily over the phone. Yeah. And they would call that mid-market or commercial. And then they realize that the money is up in the enterprise. Yeah. And so they try to move up market, so to speak, and a lot of things happen. But one of the things that happen is people start asking for POCs, proof of concept. Sure. And it's a lot of time, energy, and work. And they're also never sure whether they should charge for them, how much they should charge. So what's your approach to POCs? Or do you not have to do them anymore because UiPath has such a brand that, the point is moot, so to speak?
We still have to do them. The way I think about it, nobody buys a car without test driving it, and nobody's going to buy software without having the opportunity to test drive it, right? We're a little lucky. Our software is pretty easy to use and pretty easy to prove out. And so you can choose as a salesperson, right? You can go in, have a conversation, do a demo, offer a POC. They'll give you a process to automate. It will be ridiculously simple. Our engineers will be done in 3 or 4 hours. Everybody will go, "Oh, look how fast that was. It's awesome," right? And then you'll sell a $50,000 deal, right? Or again, if you're doing it the way we prefer and doing the how mattering, you're having conversations with 6, 8, 9 people and building out a robust set of required capabilities, and then saying, "Okay, let's look at your processes and figure out which we can automate that tick the boxes on all of these requirements," right? So we're demonstrating we can do all of it, right? Even at that, it'll take our engineer a day and a half to build it out and show it to them. So we actually love POCs because most of our competitors need 3, 5 days, 2 weeks sometimes, and we almost never need more than 2 days. So it's a strength of ours in terms of the configurability of it and the way that you build the automation in our design studio. We actually push for POCs, and we try and make them as robust as possible. And we do not charge for them unless it is like longer, like if it is so complicated and such a big thing that it's going to be like, 5 days, then we're going to charge for the extra time. Or if the customer wants us to build it so that it can go into production, right? And then there's an add-on to that because there's more time involved with doing that.
Last question on this stuff, and you can tell I have battle scars, so always just want to hear from the best. You're selling into big enterprises. I'm sure that they are not fully in the cloud yet. Is that a struggle? Are you guys on-prem, or is it are you having to sell them on moving to the cloud in addition to using RPA, or is that not an issue?
No. So 2 years ago, our customer advisory board talked to us about the importance of scalability and security, right? So in 2017, basically all of our product development dollars went into scalability and security. So if you're deploying this, you have a choice. You can put it on servers on-prem. So some of our financial services clients, as an example, where they're working with sensitive data, or even healthcare. So, the healthcare data has got to be protected as much as financial data these days. Customers can host it in their own environment, and we don't have access to it. So it makes that info security thing pretty clean, right? All their own rules and protections apply, and we can't see it. Or if you're a cloud shop, you want to put it in AWS, you want to put it in Google, you want to put it in Oracle, you want to put it in Azure. You can deploy it in any cloud provider that you want. And just in October, we launched a UiPath cloud hosted solution. So some of our customers, they're 5, 10 robots, not a big implementation, and they don't want to put the time and effort into setting up the servers or allocating the cloud space. They can pay to have us host it for them and do the work, and that's Azure hosted. Our cloud is in Azure.
Cool.
So you have a lot of choices in the way you deploy it.
Well, that's awesome. Jay, we're coming to the end of our time together, and this is the part where we like to pay it forward, and we like to tell people about some of your influences. And one of the questions I have, so you've mentioned that you're sort of become more interested in Buddhist philosophy, and there's a book called Dancing with Life. Tell us a little bit about that book and why it's made an impact on you.
So the author, Philip Moffitt, actually, he owned or was the editor of Esquire magazine for a while, and just you get into the rat race, and it just was wearing on him. And I, paraphrasing his story, and I'm probably butchering it, but he decided to sell and get out, and just left and dove into this instead. And the thing about philosophy is it can be pretty esoteric and tough to make it relatable day to day. The thing I liked about this, and the way this book has been incredibly helpful for me, is getting less focused on controlling an outcome, right, and kind of maneuvering to a very specific endpoint, and more accepting of different people, different styles, different outcomes. Because if you think about it, like you look back over your career and you see stuff that happened or didn't happen that at the time, you were angry about or happy about, that, got you to the point where you can do what you can do today. You wouldn't see it, as a step on the path when you're way back and you're 25 years old. But now when you look back, you're like, oh, that's why I went and built that small business inside of a big business, right? So I could learn enough to do something as fun as this, right? You can connect those dots in hindsight, but you can't do it when you're looking forward. And so, among the lessons from the Buddha, the thing I've learned from that book is to sort of just take a few deep breaths, see things for how they are, accept them for how they are, and sort of trust that this is just a step on a path that I don't know where it's leading, but I think when I get there, I'll probably be okay and happy with the outcome. Probably.
I love it. Jay, thanks for being on the show. You're growing your team. You guys are, going to be at $1 billion in revenue by, February, I'm sure. So what, if you're hiring or if people want to reach out to you that are listening, is it okay if they get in touch with you, and what's your preferred method of communication?
Yeah, absolutely. About 100 people helped me get this far. So I'm a big believer in, doing what I can to help. So LinkedIn's probably the best way to connect or to communicate for anybody that, wants to learn more or needs a little help.
Awesome. So it's Jay McGrath, McGrath, Area Vice President at UiPath. That's how you'll find him on LinkedIn. Jay, thanks so much for being on the show, and we'll talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sam.
Hey everybody, Sam Jacobs. Welcome to Sam's Corner. I really, really enjoyed that interview with Jay. a lot of great gems, a lot of great insights, but let's touch on a few of them that I think are kind of important. The first is when he talked about becoming a global accounts manager at Dun & Bradstreet, and you heard me kind of drill him a little bit or dig deeper a little bit on that topic. And that's important because what is one of the things that people that are line managers or individual contributors, but then have to become managers or real executives, what is one thing that they struggle with? What is one thing I've struggled with? It is how to influence people that do not work for you. Part of being an executive, if you're the head of marketing, is how do you get the head of product, the head of sales? How do you get them to want to do what you want them to do? And I think it starts with, as Jay said, genuine care and concern for them. In every interaction, I've said this a million times, I learned it from Kirk Dando. In every interaction, people are sizing you up. They're trying to understand, are you for yourself or are you for others, right? Do you care about them genuinely and altruistically, or really is everything you're doing based on your own personal agenda that you're driving? And if people feel like you genuinely care about them, you're going to get credibility, they're going to trust you, and then you can have a conversation about collaboration and opportunity. So part of it is just really understanding where they're coming from. I would probably also say just making sure that, walk softly and don't try to be too overbearing, but really explain and provide context. Every organization that tries to grow globally is going to have a matrixed organization. Sometimes you're going to be reporting to a regional manager. Sometimes if you're going to be the head of marketing in Tel Aviv, you might report to the global CMO that is in, Palo Alto. And those are always going to be difficult relationships. And so what you have to learn is empathy and perspective so that you don't become the asshole that can't get along with anybody else. So that's kind of thing number one. The second thing is, I loved how he said, how you get the results is important as what the results themselves are. You have to find repeatability in the process. And they talk about, and he talks about, the importance of multi-threading. And I really hope you listen to that part. If you're in enterprise sales, you really need to listen to that part about how do you get kind of alignment and consensus from all of the different constituents in the multi-threaded deal. And they use an incredible company, Force Management. If you're not familiar with Force, check them out. What they do is they do kind of enterprise sales training. And, they were some of the original guys, John Kaplan, among others, and Grant from PTC. But the point is that, Force does a lot of different things, but one of the things they do is they teach you about command the message, take control of the message, which is a key theme of the Challenger customer as well. Another great book, this one put out by the folks at CEB and Gartner. But the point is that it's not enough to tailor every conversation to every individual stakeholder, because then you're not going to get organizational alignment. And so one of the things that Jay talked about is leveraging the existing conversations. And as you move through the deal and you add more threads, as you add more people and stakeholders and constituents, you're not just going into the conversation blankly, but you're recapping and kind of structuring the conversation based on the aligned needs of the previous conversations. So he talks you through how to do that, but that's really, really, really important, because your instinct is going to be to go to the CFO and try to figure out what does the CFO care about, and go to the head of product and figure out what does the head of product care about. That's not the right way to do it in the absence of a message. You don't just want to do whatever that individual persona needs. If you're driving an organizational solution, you need to align the organization, not just figure out what each part of the organization wants. Really, really, really important. So I hope you took some notes, because that was an important topic. That's kind of all I have to say about Sam's Corner, and we're kind of at the end, but let me thank our sponsor. Our sponsor for the show is, of course, Outreach. Outreach is the leading sales engagement platform. They support sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale. As you know, for more information, go to outreach.com. If you want to reach me, you can. It's linkedin.com/the word in and then /Sam F. Jacobs. And if you want to learn more about Revenue Collective, which is this incredible community of customer-facing executives, including folks that are at the director level and up, then go to revenuecollective.com. There's an application if you want to apply. If you want to be a partner, you can check that out there. And if you don't want to hear any more about Revenue Collective, you're in good luck, because we're at the end of the show. So I'll talk to you next time.